Hello. Hi. Right, this is Mirror, Mirror and the Wall, part 4, Anima, Mundi, Michaela, Villiers, Kendall. Okay. Hi. Can I just say I just wanted to say to Hillary, she's in hospital, just to say hi and to, give her our love if she's watching, if she watches this after. Okay, so this is in the series that began with Pan's Labyrinth, an exploration into the labyrinth in search of the world soul, which is a term, Anima Mundi is a term from alchemy. So we started with Pan's Labyrinth, which is obviously featured a labyrinth, and that focused on World War II, which was the worst event in world history. So that was our darkest point, probably, in the world's history. But we've had some pretty dark ones. But anyway, so going back to the theme of the labyrinth, The Shining seemed like an obvious choice because it goes into depth into the maze. And actually, it really looks like Del Toro's film was loosely based. He took inspiration, certainly, from The Shining, because The Shining was made in 1978-79, released in 1980, and Del Toro's film was only about 10 years ago, I think. Anyway, so this is a really good frame showing an impression of The Shining. And if you don't know the movie, if you want to get a DVD, I recommend getting the American version, because the European version does have some crucial scenes if you want to analyze the movie, and that's the point of this. Because it loses the scenes that really actually give the clues as to the basis of the whole movie, which is a bit of a shame. So, that's the version I've got, so that sort of held me up a bit. But anyway. Right, so next clip. Next slide. Next slide. You there, Linda? All right, okay. So this is the image in Del Toro's movie as well, The Shadow, which is based on Saturn, the gruesome image of Saturn eating his children. In Del Toro's picture, it was the pale man, which was based on Goya's picture. And obviously in The Shining, there's no representation, fantasy representation, except for ghosts, but the ghosts are rarely seen anyway. So anyway, that's a horrible image. Anyway, I'll give a few notes on the movie. Okay, Stanley Kubrick was searching for a book which he could adapt for the screen back in the late 70s. Actually, 1977 was the year that The Shining, the novel by Stephen King, was published. And that was the year Chiron was discovered, which I find quite interesting. Anyway, his secretary told that he went through piles of books in his search, and she would hear them each hit the wall as he dismissed them. So he was obviously capable of writing his own story. He was very brilliant and creative. But as something of an alchemist himself, he obviously wanted to find a script, find a book that he could draw on and mold into his own vision, but use what the writer had presented him with, because that's what an alchemist does. They take ingredients and they create their own connections. The method is to draw from something on the outside, and that it's realized to be like an invitation from the creator, from the muse or from God, to produce the symbolic, logical, physical, psychic, cosmic fusions that are an illumination of the spiritual consciousness that produces understanding and faith. What Jung called synchronicity. In modern terms, synchronicity, in ancient terms, alchemy. So The Shining had just been published, as I said, and he recognized that this could be his mercurial or hermetic vehicle for what he wanted to express. And so he brought the rights and proceeded to change whatever was required, much to Stephen King's chagrin. To this day, he still doesn't get it and has even written a sequel to the novel that he refers to as the real story of the Torrance family. But anyway, and actually it's just been made into a movie and that's going to be released. It's called Doctor Sleep next year, January 2020, big date. But, you know, without Stanley Kubrick at the helm, who knows what he'll turn out. Anyway, so to get on with it, we have The Shining, which has become, after getting terrible reviews when it came out, has become something of a cult film. And there are loads of analysis on the internet because people have slowly discovered that there's much more to it. There are layers that aren't obvious at first glance. In fact, I saw it not when it was released in 1980. I saw it on late night TV in the 90s, I think, and loved it. I thought it was a great horror movie, but never, you know, didn't give it a second glance as to what was going on under the surface. Anyway, since then, people have gathered that there is much more to it. They do get a bit fixated on a theory about Apollo 11 that actually Kubrick was told to stage the moon landings, and that becomes a bit laborious after a while. I mean, he might have made a comment about that. He makes a lot of political comments in the film, and but I wouldn't think he'd dwell on it because it's not really that interesting. There are a lot of other secrets that are more interesting than that. Anyway, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Anyway, so keep in mind in the 70s at the end of the 70s when he filmed, he had started his career in the 40s, 50s, 60s at the height of the Cold War. And of course, one of his great successes was Dr. Strangelove, which came out in the early 60s. And that was a satire on the government's use of weapons, the bomb, obviously, in that, and the Cold War. And so it's very unlikely that he would have had anything to do with collaboration with something like that. Okay, so he actually went to live in England in 1961 because a lot of directors, such as himself, were being silenced, they couldn't act freely, and the movies they did make, they did have to disguise their intentions, so he's not the only director to have to, you know, give hidden messages in his films. Right, so to go on with it, in fact, in The Shining, there is obviously sort of a reference to Psycho, which is the very famous Hitchcock movie. There's a famous shower scene in there, and there is obviously the psychological horror of the Oedipus complex going on there, and there's a bit of this in The Shining as well, although you don't really notice it. If you dig deep, you can see it there. Right, okay. So the next slide, please. Push ahead. Right, so this is contemplative. Okay. Right. Okay, so I wanted to give a quote with this. Quote is by Carl Jung, and it's everybody acts out a myth, but not everyone knows what that myth is. Creative fantasy draws upon the images which are found in the mythologies of all ages and all peoples. The sum of those images constitute the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is the psychic correlate of the differentiation of the human mind. This is the reason mythological images are able to arise over and over again, and to agree with one another not only in all corners of the wide earth, but at all times. He says, I took it upon myself to get to know my myth, and I regarded it as the task of tasks. And that's a very interesting statement, because I remember years ago at the CPA, the Psychological Centre for Astrology in London, I went to this really interesting lecture by Darby Costello, and she was talking about our personal myths. And I hadn't thought of anything like that, but it was a very useful, until that point, but it was a very, very useful concept, because then I did realize there was a particular myth that had followed me all over the place. And even the pictures of it, I'd been fascinated. And when you do realize your myth, you do realize that there is always a conflict in a myth, of course, because all the mythologies have conflict in them. That's the whole point. So once you realize your myth, and my particular one was the Lady of Shalott, which is probably quite a lot of people's myth. And actually my partner at the moment, his myth turned out to be Icarus. So it was interesting when we first met, we went to the Tate Gallery and saw these huge pictures, the wonderful portraits, the romantic paintings of Icarus and Lady of Shalott side by side. And I realized there was, something trying to tell us something. I didn't listen, unfortunately, but, that's another story. Anyway, so that's about our myths. And it really does pay us to consider what ours might be. And if it is a very negative myth, or if there's a sad ending, we might even consider how we could change the story, how we could think of a more positive ending for the myth. You'd be surprised how effective that can be. So there you go. Anyway, so to press on, to the angel and demon, the next slide. Please, Linda? That's it. So I love this. This is the sort of an expression of the myth, because it expresses the shadow. And obviously you've got the demon, like the Minotaur, or the devil, fighting with the angel, and it's a pretty bad battle on there. But if we are not conscious of our shadows and don't realize that they do have to be brought to light, and we do have to be wary of them, they can be extremely dangerous, and we can spend our whole lives not realizing exactly how we've been dominated. Anyway, so onward. So that sort of expresses, that's a good expression for the movie, The Shining, because it's very mythological. It has ties to the Bible and to astrology as well. So anyway, there's Tony the Tiger on a lighter note. And Tony the Tiger features in The Shining, because he is the representation of the young boy who's called Danny in the movie, Danny Torrance. And after he's had an incident with his father, when he's only 5, but a couple of years ago, his mother is expressing to the doctor, and there'll be a doctor's scene that we'll just look at, and that his father has been an alcoholic who's recovering. That's Jack Torrance. But that at one stage he was quite rough with Danny. She goes on to say, he didn't mean it. It was an accident, but he accidentally broke his arm. But then the doctor says, well, asks when did Tony, because he has an imaginary friend that's in the form of his finger that he calls Tony. And it's obvious, although they don't say so, that it's based on Tony the Tiger from the Frosties serials. So there's Tony the Tiger, and he's actually expressing something in the movie that you begin to see is very prevalent, and that's the use of hand movements, like he's using the fist on the right hand side there, and he's got his left hand raised with the finger to the sky, and then he's got the colours on him of red, blue. He's got quite a lot of orange, but that's all indicative because Stanley Kubrick used colour and movement. In fact, he used so much direction, perspective, to demonstrate and to make people think and to make people look, because the thing is The Shining, to be shone. And so what he's demonstrating is look deeper. Don't stay with the surface, notice things. And actually, when you do go over the film, and you have to go over it time and time again if you want to look deeper, he's saying listen. So you listen to the soundtrack, you listen to the music, you notice what people are saying or what they're not saying, the directions, as I say, they're going in, and even the colors they're wearing, because they're expressing something particular. And in this case, it's to do with the right brain and the left brain. So the right brain is obviously the creative side, intuitive, creative, and the left brain, which is ruled, it gets confusing here, is ruled by the opposite side of the body, as we know, but it does get very confusing. So the left brain is ruled by the right side of the body, the right side of the brain is ruled by the left side of the body. And there you go. Tony Tiger's just demonstrating that. Okay, so watch out for it during the movie, when you get the movie, because we can't actually show it to you here, unfortunately, but never mind. Hopefully I'll get slides together in the future, because this is just an introduction to this piece, because actually the movie has so much information in it that this could only be an introduction anyway. Okay, so the next slide quickly. Calendar. So the next slide there. Okay, so we don't actually have any other slides of the film, but this is the one that we do have.
There's a bit of a delay with...
Oh, is there? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so can you hear me all right? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'll try to describe what's happened up to this point is Jack Torrance, who is Danny's father and the husband of Wendy there, standing at the back, has gone up to the mountains in Montana for an interview at an hotel, the Overlook. Most people will know this movie, so I don't have to go into huge detail. But he's gone up for an interview as the winter caretaker to stay there for 6 months over the winter with his family. So he goes for the interview, and he has the interview in the office of the manager. And as he's at the interview, Danny is in the bathroom, and he's speaking to Tony, his imaginary friend. Tony is in the form of his finger. I think it's his left finger. I'm not sure. I get confused. Okay, I think it's his left one, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, because it's his right brain. So yeah, he's in his bathroom, which you see there at the back, and he's at the sink and looking in the mirror, and Tony's talking to him, and he suddenly sees a vision, and he sees a vision of these twins, which later it will transpire you don't know whether anything is a real ghost, but we assume that they're ghosts of the two little girls who were murdered at the hotel by their father, who went mad from cabin fever, as the hotel manager describes it, and killed his wife as well. So he killed his family up there. Well, the office manager tells Jack Torrance about this, and Jack says, is he worried about that? And Jack Torrance says, no, doesn't think it'll bother him. But anyway, so as he's just said that, we get Danny having this vision of these two little girls, and then an awful vision of a torrent, in fact, of blood coming through one of the elevators in the hotel. And he sees this, and then he blacks out, he faints. So this is just after that. Wendy, his mother at the back, has called the doctor. And so the doctor has examined Danny. So in this room, why I wanted to, and as I say, it's cut out of the European version DVD, unfortunately, but it has some very important clues in there as to what Kubrick's getting at. So you can see that Wendy is wearing blue. As I said, she's wearing a blue smock, but underneath she's wearing red. So that's indicative of right brain, left brain. She's in a defensive position because her hands are crossed, her arms are crossed. Her back's against the wall, that as actually Kubrick does these very clever crossovers. So when Danny has the vision of the lift, the elevator with the blood, that crosses over to this scene. And so you get that elevator with the blood coming out of it actually projected onto that wall that Wendy's leaning against, facing Danny. And it's as though it's got eyes at the top of it that reflect the teddy bear cushion that he's lying on. So, okay, so if you look at the Goofy puppet, there's a puppet at the far right-hand side, and that actually is mirroring, because there's a lot of mirroring goes on in Mirror, Mirror in this movie, and it's wearing the same color combination as Wendy is, because it's meant to reflect her. And it is a puppet, so it's reflecting that she actually is something of a puppet. She's not being conscious, she's not awake, and so she's been in denial. She's been denying that there is a problem really with Danny's father, her husband, and that as an alcoholic, he may not be in full control, and that he could be something of a danger, in fact. In fact, in this scene, there are some hints that there could be sexual abuse coming involved. And in later scenes, it becomes more obvious that there possibly is. And if it hasn't happened, then it is likely to happen. So she now, you can see she's very disturbed because she realizes now that she's not fully conscious of it, but her awareness has woken up. So she literally has her back against the wall. So you see a little duck up there, yellow duck on the windowsill. That was in the bathroom. Somehow that's moved to the windowsill. There's a tiger picture, which you can hardly see, that's under the curtain. And that's got a tiger face with one eye showing. And the other eye is covered by a little chalkboard. And that is mirroring the fact that of Danny's Tony the Tiger, his little daemon, his companion, his unconscious, in other words, that's come out to defend him and guide him. And it is also mirroring the fact that now Wendy has one eye open. Funnily enough, the cushion, I think we could, well, actually, I'll talk about that picture before we go to the cushion. But when you see the cushion next, I think we've got a clip, a slide of that. You'll see that the eye there, he's leaning on one eye with his head, so the other eye is open. So you've got the opposite eyes there open. One of his eyes is open, and so is one of, oh no, yeah, we'll go back. And so is one of Wendy's. So they're sort of becoming conscious here. Also, there is significance to the balloon up there, but I won't go into that now. That can wait till later. So that picture actually at Wendy's side, and it's very easy to dismiss that because it seems like it's just a picture of an elephant and a lion and whatever that is. It took some time. It looks like a dog, actually. It's got the same coloring, though. That's what's interesting about it. It's obviously blue and red. And it seems to be pointing towards the bathroom, which is interesting. And nothing that Kubrick put in this film means nothing. So he would not have put that picture there if it didn't mean something. So, and the other thing that's interesting is the soundtrack, because the soundtrack, it's either in the scene before it, or if it's this, I think it's this scene. The soundtrack is actually, I've noted it down here. It's called It's called The Awakening of Jacob. And that's, so I thought, well, that's biblical. So I looked in the Bible to see if there was anything about elephants. Well, I didn't look in the Bible, I looked on the internet, obviously, but I couldn't find anything significant about elephants. So I went on to the lion, a few things about the lion. Lion sort of, it sort of has a tie-in with the tiger, could be something. The dog, couldn't figure out what that was. Anyway, I went back to the Awakening of Jacob, and actually that is a story that is in the Kabbalah. So it's it's about Jacob, and about his dream of angels ascending and descending up and down the ladder. And he then named the rock that had been his pillow. So you get another reflection there. You've got a pillow, you've got Jacob, you've got awakenings going on here. And so he named the rock that had been his pillow Bethel, the house of God. And Jacob had a twin. Well, that's interesting because obviously we've got twins in this movie. So Jacob had a twin named Esau. And so that seemed to be onto something. Anyway, so you go further into that. And yes, in the Kabbalah then, and I'm not Jewish, so I don't know a lot about the Kabbalah, but the Kabbalah obviously has become much more popular in the last few years. And we all know something of it because the chakras are taken from the Tree of Life. The tarot cards actually are connected to the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. There are lots of beliefs, New Age beliefs, that are coming out of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. So, we are very familiar, even though we didn't know we were, with it. And actually, I have been dipping into it, over the last few years, but I'm not an expert by any means. Anyway, so it says about the Kabbalah, the Book of Formation is an ancient Kabbalistic text attributed to Abraham. And it enumerates the 12 months of the Jewish calendar and explains that each corresponds to the Hebrew letter in a particular sense or talent, i.e. the snake strikes fear because it was created from the essence of fear. So about the elephant, the word kof has a meaning, and it means the eye of the needle. And this links with the Song of Creation, which was written by King David, and there are various songs in praise of the Creator by parts of nature, like the sky, the earth, the ocean, rivers, etc., and the animals. And this ties into the story because there is very much a theme of going into the mountains and nature and the old ancient history of it, and about the tribes there, the Native American tribes that were decimated, and on their ground, their hallowed ground, the hotel, the Overlook, was built, and so it's about the colonial white man coming in, the settlers, and just having no respect for nature or the ancient ways. So there's a big theme of that. So anyway, so King David wrote this about every creature and the essence of them, and in it is described the song of the elephant, which is how great your actions are, God, but the elephant means something deeper. The word great reflects and refers to the act of creation itself, the creation that turns nothingness into somethingness. And the image of the elephant reminds us that through God's infinite aspect, though it cannot be seen as in a revealed manner in our physical realm, it is nonetheless present, and not only present, but continually recreating our space. The elephant is said to fit through the eye of the needle, and so describe the source entering the space of light. The source being God's absolute infinite aspect, and the space of light being the infinite realm represented by the eye of the needle. And Kubrick is reminded of this by placing a tiny elephant on the filing cabinet, if you notice it, if you watch the movie, in front of the manager's office as Jack Torrance is going in. There's a very, very tiny elephant. And so that's a marker, because he does this all the time, that this is a connection. So it means as he's going into this manager's office, that this is sort of the start of the whole very mythological story going on. So it's marking that this is an important moment. So anyway, so this obviously connects to the Kabbalah. So that's a thread worth, the golden thread, following it through the labyrinth. So that's a thread worth following. And so once you do follow it, then it becomes obvious that the lion has the connection to the Kabbalah, which it does. It does seem to be pointed to because the cushion does look like a lion as well. So, and Daniel, lions, lion cub, sounds like there's a connection there. So it's as though Danny is the lion cub. And then the dog, well, the shape of it is like and I'm not sure about, I apologize to anyone about my pronunciation, a Metsutsa. And it's a Jewish scroll, that's a little rolled up scroll that in Jewish households is put on the door as a protection since ancient times. And it's rolled up and it's put in this cylindrical, usually metal or could be wood, cylinder, and put at an angle. And it's put at an angle because apparently that connects the horizontal with the vertical, because there's a meaning in everything in the Kabbalah, in the Tree of Life. The direction, the lines, the paths, everything. And anyway, so getting back to Wendy, she's standing by this. So obviously there is a message to her to protect. And I'm interpreting what I think is Kubrick's intention here, but it's just to go with it because it seems right. In this thread, it seems right, and who knows? That he is the lion cub, to remember the Kabbalah, the elephant, where they, who they are, to start to remember who they are, what they've come from, what tribe they come from, what people, what ancient customs. And they actually, interestingly, she has an Indian style, tribal style, American native style belt on, and so does Danny, if you notice, if you watch the movie. So there's little hints everywhere. They are from an ancient tribe, a natural tribe like the Native American people. Anyway, so and she is to protect the lion cub because that's the symbol of protection. So okay, we'll go on from there. Next one, if there's I don't know what's left on the slides, Linda. Oh yeah, oh no, we're back to Tony. What's the next one on there? What's after? Oh yeah, there's the elephant. Okay, so just quickly, that's the elephant that I'm describing. And you can see, interestingly, in this picture that it is wearing the same colors, blue and red, which are the colors in the Kabbalah and in the Tree of Life of the left brain, which is logic, is blue, and the red is the creative side of the brain, the intuition, is red. So anytime you see red and blue, that's right brain, left brain, intuition, creativity, logic, blue. Okay, so shall we go on there? And it's got something in his hand too, and that's interesting, but we won't discuss that now. It's like a mark. Okay, so there's Danny lying on the cushion, and there you can see it's a teddy, but I think it looks like a lion as well, and as there are ties, and there's the eye as well. Okay, so we'll go. And he's wearing red and blue, as you can see there, and that's very significant as well. There's a 42, and that's significant also. Which we won't discuss now, but that's later. Okay, there's the Masutsa, which is the protective symbol to be put on the door. Okay, so shall we go on to the next one? So that's the picture. That's one of the pictures. It actually isn't the picture, but it's by the same artist and it's in the same series as that's on the door leading into the office manager's office. And it's called The Great Mother. And it's obviously ethnic and possibly Native American, although I think this is Canadian. He's a Canadian native artist, very iconic actually, and he's a shaman. So there are a couple of pictures there. The other one is a flock of loons on the other wall facing the office. So Kubrick is making statements again about the tribe, the native, the culture, the ancient worlds, and also Wendy's colouring. Her straight black hair is more Native American or even Egyptian. Okay, so pressing on. Next slide, please, Linda. Okay, there's more to this. Now, you might wonder why suddenly Horus is in here. He's the Egyptian god. That's because next to the little elephant on the filing cabinet that you can hardly see as Jack is going into the office, there's also a little letter scale, a scales that is to weigh letters. And it's tiny, but it's saying about weighing. So, and there are hints later in the movie of what this means. And so what I believe it means is that this is making a statement about the weighing up of souls in ancient Egypt. And what they did, and it's sort of a Libran, it's a Libran motif as well, really, I mean, to weigh. Anyway, this is Horus, who has the head of a raptor or an eagle, and he leads the souls, the deceased in ancient Egypt, to the scales. And at the scales, Anubis will weigh the heart of the deceased against a feather on the other side of the scales. And the feather is meant to represent the universe. And the great mother of the universe is called Ma'at. And I think we've got a picture of a feather next. I think we got that one. I don't know. Have we a slide of that? Not that we need a picture of a feather, really. That's next. Yeah, okay. Well, okay, we don't need the feather, but that's Matt, the universe, which, hardly weighs anything. That's it. Okay, so we can go straight on. So, okay, if the heart does not pass muster and weighs too heavy, yeah, then instead of being taken on to meet Ariasis, the heart will be then thrown to, and that's the next slide, to the next one. The next slide. No, back to Thoth. That is. That's Thoth. No, yeah, it's all right if you can't get. That's it. That's Thoth with Anit, and Thoth has the head of a dog, or a wolf, I suppose, a dog. And you can see there's the scales on his shoulder there. And he has he is leading Anit, which has the head of a crocodile, the mane of a lion, the body of a leopard or a tiger, a cat, and the body, the rest of the body is a hippopotamus. So the heart will be thrown to her, I think it's a her, to devour if it doesn't pass the scales. Anyway, so this is very crucial because actually it is to do with the tree of, it is to do with the origins of the tree of life. So that's where it does actually tie in, that was his intention, I believe, because everything else seems to fit together. Anyway, so going on to the next slide. Yeah, it's next. I don't know what is next. Oh yeah, well that's the office. That's the best. It's the negative of the office because of copyright. We couldn't show anything else, but never mind because you can get the movie anyway, and hopefully I'll get slides together for the next one. So this is in the office, and that's Jack on the left hand side, and then opposite him is the summer caretaker, Bill Watson, and so you've got. They're in strategic positions because they represent Cancer and Capricorn as the summer and winter, because obviously astrology is very, very highlighted in the Kabbalah and in the Tree of Life. So actually what I didn't say was there's pictures of the mountains in different seasons outside the door as well, which represent the cardinal cross. So the solstices, summer solstice, winter solstice, and the spring and autumn equinoxes. And that's very important too. Um, so you go into this office and there's the manager at the desk, and what we can't see is behind him is there's a window, and out of the window you can see the mountain range in the distance. Well, this has baffled analysts too, because the layout of the hotel, that should be an interior wall and there should be no window there, but there is, and it's got a mountain behind it. Well, that's another thing that the Kubrick did. He made it very disorientating. So you couldn't, and unconsciously you pick up this. Things are uncanny or they're disorientating, and you can't quite, you know something's not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it. But anyway, in this case, that is meant to represent the mountain in the background, I think, is to do with the highest point of the tree of life. Because what I think the intention was of Stanley Kubrick was to, first of all, the hotel itself is a labyrinth. So there is a labyrinth outside, there's a maze in the garden, and that reflects the inner labyrinth, which is the hotel itself. And actually there's another labyrinth because there's a model of the maze inside as well. So it's quite a lot of labyrinths going on here. But anyway, so it's disorientating. People get sort of lost in there. You don't know what's going on. It's obvious it was color coded. You could tell that. But it seems that what Kubrick has done is actually made the hotel as the labyrinth, which is also the labyrinth of the mind. And he very much uses the myth of the Minotaur, because Jack sort of assumes the persona of the Minotaur when he's sort of possessed or he goes mad. You don't know which it is. And so what I think he's done is superimpose the tree of life as the map to the hotel. So the tree of life itself is the map of the labyrinth. And this makes sense when you go through the movie, because you can see then that then the whole idea, and perhaps we can go to the tree of life now, the next one. The next slide is the tree of life. So that's the tree of life, and there are 22 pathways, and there are 10 sephirots, and in each sephirot it's ruled by a planet. At the bottom there is number 10, Malkuth, and that represents the earth. So that's the earth and the things in the earth, and that's obviously the earth rules that. Then you go up to Yesod, which is number 9. That's in purple. So you've got the color coded thing right there. Yesod is ruled by the moon, and then you go up. You travel up the path to Hod, which is, you go the next way. So it goes right and then it goes left. So you go up to Netzach, which is number 7, which is green, and that's ruled by Venus. And then, I'll describe what those mean afterwards, but I just want to get a feel for the whole thing. So then you go across to Hod, which is number 8, ruled by the number 8, and that's ruled by Mercury, and its color is orange. And then you go across to the middle, which is Tippereth, and that's ruled by the sun. That represents the heart, the center, and that's number 6. And the solar plexus, because these obviously ruled the chakras, as lots of people know as well. So then you go up to number 4, Hesed, I think it's pronounced, Hesed, and that is ruled by Jupiter. And then you go across to number 5, and Jupiter is blue, obviously. Then the color red represents Mars. That makes sense. Number 5, Gibera. And then you go up to Bina, which is number 3, and that's represented by Saturn. And then you go across to Chokmah, and that's represented by Uranus. Sometimes the outer planets are switched around a bit. Some people disagree about what, because they were discovered obviously later. So sometimes people think that Pluto rules Hokmah, and maybe, Uranus rules Dath, which is this in the middle, Dath. Dath is actually not a Sephiroth. It's a location. It's called the abyss. So it's the place that leads to the other realms. So obviously you can imagine in the hotel, this is where the ghosts are. This is the haunted room 237, because this is where you shouldn't go, because you're going to see something that is obviously very frightening, because this is where leads down to the reflection, because everything, as I said, is mirror image. So it turns out the tree of life has a mirror image, and that is called the tree of death. So the tree of death is down below, and that's like in the basement of the hotel. And so that's where the ghosts are. That's where the spirits are. And that's where the evil spirits are. The ones up in the hotel, there are good spirits here too, and they are from the tribal cultures, and they represent the good spirits. So the hotel is a representation of the whole thing. Anyway, going up to the center, up at the top is number 1, Kita, and that represents the highest point of consciousness, the creators, the universe. So that's what the point is when you're down on earth. And obviously the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, like evolutionary astrology, obviously the belief is in past lives, that we are reincarnated in order to climb the ladder. And it is actually climbing the ladder, climbing the pathways to higher consciousness. So each life we have, our task is to become aware and conscious, and we climb upwards to each of these levels. And our task is to fight the lower regions, to get conscious, fight our shadows, and not get drawn down into the lower regions, which is evil. It's interesting at the moment because there's a lot of confusion about the Kabbalah. I mean, some people have labeled, said the Kabbalah is evil, and there's the Cabal, they call it, and the Illuminati, and all this, loads of this on the internet, and there seems so much confusion. Whereas the Kabbalah is actually has always promoted consciousness. It came about in the Middle Ages, and it came about, in fact, at the time of the Cathars, and the time of the Albanesian Crusades. So it seems like they were having, and there was a huge Jewish community that lived in the Cathars cities, and they, I believe, they all had the same beliefs. The Jewish communities and the Cathars all had the same belief, and this is what it represents. So really, it was that Jewish community that a lot of them died along with the Cathars, but some of them did manage to flee to Provence and then to Spain, and they managed to, and then that is said, that's where they kept the religion going with the Kabbalah. And obviously the Cathars also, the stonemasons also, the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitalier, they created the stonemasons, which were the Freemasons. And it was a secret society because otherwise they'd been burned as heretics by the Catholic Church, which is not very godly when you think about it, but no one seems to consider that. They're the evil ones. Funny that. But anyway, let's not go into that. Anyway, so that I believe is the basis and the map for The Shining. And so what I'm going to do is try to get the slides together next time and then go through the story and go through using the map. And I don't know if we've got any more time to talk about it, or are we out of time here, Linda? I don't know. How are we doing? How are we for time, Linda? Sorry?
Yes, it's okay. There's a delay because I'm in Australia.
Yes, I know. Amazing.
So please be patient. You can have a few more minutes.
Okay, great. Okay. So what I'll do is talk a bit more about the Tree of Life then. Right. So
About 10 minutes.
Okay, fine. So I'll just talk a bit more about that then. Okay. So yeah, as I said, there are 22 pathways and 10 sephirots. So beginning at the bottom, again, Malkuth is the kingdom, and the pathways, they're called pillars as well. So that pillar leading up on the right-hand side from Malkuth is called the pillar of mildness. So that leads up then to Venus and to Netzach, number 7. And Netzach is called victory. So it's the forces of nature. It's Venus ruling air. It's in the air element. And, well, I suppose it's very Libran in this case. And it's called the air element, and the forces of nature are called Yetzirah. So it's the formative world, the mental plane. It's really fascinating, actually. So across from that is Hod, and that's Mercury. And Mercury is very important in the Tree of Life because Mercury is Hermes, and Hermes was, the first Hermes, they say. It could be Thoth, actually, that's where the Egyptian connection is, because it's said that Hermes started there at the time of ancient Egypt and those other ancient civilizations like Babylonia and Mesopotamia, and then filtered into ancient Greece and then ancient Rome, and so it all filtered through. But Mercury was Hermes, and that's where it surfed. Hermes, the Hermetic philosophy surfaced in the Renaissance in Italy. Funnily enough, in the very place that the Catholic Church had tried to wipe out any of these beliefs, which are based on the Gnostic Gospels, of course. As the Leonardi, the Da Vinci Code, the films and Angel and Demons, they're based on those books, and they are about the Holy Grail and about the belief that the Gnostic Gospels were destroyed, some did survive and were found, and that the Grail was brought to France, and that Mary Magdalene had a child and actually came to France. And that's where the Cathars were founded then. They are Gnostics. So out of that came, so they were carrying all this history about Hermes as well. And that went into Renaissance Italy. And that was the Renaissance. And that's where the Illuminati comes from. And the Illuminati it was secret because there was the Roman Catholic Church, and they would have been burned as heretics. And so Leonardo da Vinci was an Illuminati, and Michelangelo was Illuminati, and the greatest minds, the greatest creative minds were Illuminati. And that's why the founding fathers of America were Illuminati. It's true, but it is not something evil as the Catholic Church would have had us believe. But anyway, the Catholic Church has done a lot of good as well, but early on they did a lot, very, very cruel, terrible. In fact, I went to Rome recently and it was amazing. I went to the Vatican and I was amazed at all the treasures from all over the world. And they have preserved it all, but it is like they've stolen it all from ancient Egypt and all over the place. So people don't really think about all of this. And so there's much to this. And the Tree of Life is, as I said, is not black magic. It is not the Satan worship, and nor are the Freemasons. But there is, as actually Manly P. Hall says, you can use any of these. They do bestow power, but power for good, power for Christ consciousness. But anything can be misused. And that's also the statement Kubrick is making in The Shining, that they have been misused, that the tree of death has been used. Satan is tricky, and Satan can be conjured up, as in The Shining. You believe in Satan and you follow that sort of kudos like Jack Torrance does, and you can seem to go mad, but are you also possessed? And there's more to it than that. Anyway, so finishing that up, the pillar of serenity then, So Hod, Mercury, number 8, is to do with Hermes as well. Mercury is the connector, as in the mythology. Mercury, with his wings, flies and connects and rules the mind. And the mind is what connects the consciousness, and the right brain and the left brain connect. There, it is necessary, it says in the Tree of Life, to connect both sides of the brain. You can't use just one. You have to connect them, and that's what the film does. It shows how Danny is taught to connect both sides of the brain and fight his adversary, which turns out to be his own father, who does not connect both sides, who gets completely dragged into the right side, which is creative, but it also can take you he brings the Kubrick also brings the myth of the back eye in. And the myth of the back eye is to do with being sucked into delusion. And alcohol and drugs can obviously add to that. And Jack is weak, and he's an alcoholic. And he is also, which is another thing that Kubrick brings up, he is also to do with a tribe like the Canaanites. So basically Jack is a Canaanite. That's what seems to be his intention. Now, I'm not saying that's absolute, but it really seems it when you look at the whole construct of the movie. And so, and Danny and Wendy are of the tribe of the Israelites. I think it's the Israelites. Yeah. Anyway, so, but also the Native Americans are of that natural tribe too. So he's mixing a lot up there, but it's fascinating. And he's used, as I said, these pathways. It goes on to this pillar of severity. Then it goes up to Gabura, which is Mars. So that's the pillar of severity leading up to Mars. Mars represents strength. And then up to Saturn, which is Bina, which is ruled by the number 3, and that's understanding. It's what you know, and it's yin. So it's what you know. Opposite to what you know is Uranus, ruling Chokmah, which is wisdom, which is what you do with what you know. And the whole thing's fascinating. And so it's very exciting when you see the movie and you see how this is reflected when you actually go for the film. So I'm going to be working on doing that next and hopefully getting slides up to do it this time. And I recommend anyone to get hold of the film, and preferably the US copy DVD if they can in the meantime. Okay? Right. So is that time up, Linda?